Yeah, thank you, Bill, for that introduction. And it's really nice to see so many new faces actually here. So I started in this role a few months ago, coming to it from originally being a postdoc actually in the faculty of biology, medicine and health. And as Bill says, I'm very much interested in the day-to-day challenges that researchers face when it comes to managing data. Okay, so yeah, I work with Core Facilities, and at Manchester, or in FBMH, we have 9 core facilities, and they all vary greatly in the types of data that they generate, ranging from sort of bioimaging with lots of images, data, electron microscopy producing specialist types of data, and also huge variation in the quantity of data that's being generated. So some core facilities will produce tens of gigabytes of data per month, whereas others are producing terabytes of data per experiment. And also the types of data and the quantity of data is constantly changing over time as we get new instruments, higher resolution instruments, and much faster instruments. So core facilities are the major data generators in the faculty. So at last count, I think it was around, the last estimate was around 750 terabytes of data annually, up to about a petabyte of data annually. So we've got huge, huge quantities of data that's going through. And unsurprisingly, core facility data is central to many research projects, with researchers often using many different core facilities in given projects. Core facilities benefit from having a central managerial structure. So each core facility has its own manager and an academic lead, and they report to a manager who is responsible for all core facilities, and then they report up the chain to the higher faculty management. So as Rosie was saying, we do have these structures in Manchester that's quite centralised, and it's true. But we can kind of benefit from this in that we can come up with RDM policies, and we can use those to use the structure to implement those across core facilities. So where do core facilities fit in that RDM landscape at the university? So when you think of research data management, these sort of key stakeholders often spring to mind. So firstly, you have your researchers, which includes many different roles, so from PIs down to PhD students, and vastly different levels of experience. Have research IT, which is delivering the infrastructure, information governance to make sure that we are compliant. And of course, the library. And the library is there offering overarching support to all the faculties at the university. And this is often delivered through policy, training and support with DMPs, and supporting researchers in getting their data out into repositories. So core facilities, I think, can also work alongside the library and these other stakeholders to help deliver RDM support on a day-to-day basis. And also we can sort of lead by example in a way by implementing best practices in core facilities. Our users can see how we're working and learn from that. And I think this is really important because, as I say, you've got researchers with different levels of experience and different levels of engagement with other stakeholders. So for instance, a PhD student, technicians and research assistants and junior postdocs are unlikely to be writing DMPs, at that stage may not even be publishing data, but they will be using core facilities. So it's another avenue to reach these groups. So how can core facilities help? So I started off doing a survey and informal discussions with PIs and postdocs in the faculty. And the response was quite varied. So you have on one end of the spectrum, some PIs who are very happy with their data management that they've got going on in their labs. In the middle, you've got the vast majority who have some systems in place, but feel like there's room for improvement. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have some PIs who are, you get a sense that they are swimming in data and they're really struggling to keep track of it. So from these discussions, there were the 4 key themes that came out. So the first was data storage and data transfer, in particular accessibility and capacity. So accessibility, by that I mean often data is stored on personal hard drives, personal computers and private cloud storage. And this is inaccessible to the rest of the research group. and certainly inaccessible in many cases to the PI. And PIs are often frustrated at this because they can't see where the data is or what data that they've got. Capacity is the big problem that comes up, is just having enough storage space for all the data that they're generating. And when you ask PIs about the quantities of data that they're generating, often they're not entirely confident when they give you the number. They're not entirely sure how much data they're actually generating. And this is often because the data is being generated by PIs and postdocs. There's concerns over GDPR and security. So this particularly relates to where people want to use tools, so electronic lab books and data management tools. They're worried about whether they're allowed to use those tools from a security perspective, and also issues of moving terabytes of data around between different storage sites. The other issue that comes up time and time again is annotation, so collecting metadata and sharing metadata. And this relates to often datasets being stored on central storage devices, but then it not necessarily being clear in months or years to come what actually that data is. So by annotating it and linking that annotation to the data at the point of generation, this would be really helpful for making sure that researchers know what that data is in time to come. Also sharing, so sharing data internally, sharing with external collaborators, and sharing publicly. And this is both positive and negative data, and also data sets that won't necessarily make it into a paper because they're sort of tangential to the research project. And yeah, they don't have the resources or time to actually pursue those loose ends. So it'd be nice still to be able to just make that data publicly available. And also there's a lot of interest in tools. So electronic lab books, people would really like to know if there is a university-backed electronic lab book. So I'm going to talk now about a little project that we've got going on in Core Facilities that's looking to address the first two of these challenges, so storage and transfer and data annotation. So Core Facilities, I've got this mission statement, which is to implement efficient and streamlined data management solutions to support research in maximising the use of core facility data. And key thing is to have minimal administrative hurdles to make sure that this is a really easy solution for people to use. So the first goal is to have a single storage location that is known and accessible to PIs, and this helps us as well avoid duplication of having a situation where you've got data sets stored on different devices. To streamline data transfer, to make sure that it's really easy to move data between short and long-term storage, and to minimize the data transfer steps. And one of the ways in which we can do this is by bringing the compute and software to the data rather than having to move the data to specific PCs where they can access software. And also to actually capture metadata at the point of data generation and then link this to the data. So the approach that we're working on at the moment is a local storage and compute platform. So at the moment, this is just a pilot project that we've got going. So the idea is that we collect data on instrument PCs in individual core facilities and then feed these into a centralized storage and compute platform where the data can reside short term, so in the region of weeks or months, depending on how long it takes to do the initial processing steps. This is quite different to what we have at the moment, where core facilities will generate their own sort of data and hold on to it themselves and give it back to researchers in different ways, different routes. So the researchers will be able to log into this platform remotely and process the data. And once they've done the processing, it's then possible to transfer the data onto the university data storage, which is our central backed up super secure storage, and is visible. Once it's there, the data can be visible to all members of the research group. We're also looking at ways we can bring cloud into this for cheap archiving of data. And obviously some data, once it's published, it will be sent on then to repositories. We're also looking to bring the university's high performance compute into the system. So anybody that needs to use that will be able to do it from the storage platform and don't have to move the data to it. And then we're looking at ways in which we can use this sort of central structure to really embed best practice, research data management best practice into our workflows. I've been thinking about this in the context of the FAIR data principles. So firstly is metadata collection. So all core facilities use a piece of software called PPMS, which is an ordering software. So every order that goes into Core Facilities has to go through PPMS. And this software contains customizable forms that we can use to collect high-level metadata. So for instance, PI, name, researcher name, project title, a brief description of the project, and a few tags. And then we're looking at ways in which we can use templates, metadata templates in Core Facilities to help capture data at the point of data generation. So this is helpful for making sure, for prompting researchers to collect the metadata that they'll need. And this is helpful for students who are perhaps less aware of what metadata they'll need for publication, and also for anybody who's new to a particular type of experiment. And we're also looking at ways in which we can bring controlled vocabularies into those templates. And also then looking at ways in which we can port that metadata then into the institutional repository so that it's visible to PIs, so that they have an effective kind of a dashboard of all the data sets that they are generating. The other thing is to look at file naming conventions. So some Core Facilities already do this, and we're looking at rolling it out to other Core Facilities as well. And also file formatting as well. So some instruments will generate data in proprietary file formats, and we're looking at whether we can actually convert them to open file formats at the point of data generation. So by having script running in the background, so as a file is being generated, it's automatically being converted into an open file format. So that's something that we're also sort of testing and working on at the moment. And then the other thing is training and asking the question of actually, do I really need to keep that data? So once data gets into this central platform, there's going to be a point at which the researcher has to ask themselves, is this data worth keeping? And if it is, then okay, we'll transfer it onto the research data storage at the university. If not, then they should be deleting it at that stage. So we can prompt that question to be asked. And also looking at ways in which you can better design experiments. So just because you can generate a terabyte of data in an experiment doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. A lot of that data, if for instance, if it's a time course, a lot of that data is actually not going to be very useful. So do you need to keep it? And also looking in the wider context and how we can help researchers manage data over the course of the life cycle of that data, and looking at tools in which we could use for that. So one that particularly springs to mind is OSF. That's one that we're quite interested in at the moment. It's got a lot of really nifty features. So there are, of course, a lot of challenges with implementing this project. So it is a pilot project at the moment, and some of the challenges that we are facing at the moment is just the sheer volume and the complexity of the data. So we've got huge amounts of data that we're trying to sort of put through this system. It's got to be robust and it has to be reliable. And also we've got different sort of levels of data. So we'll have raw data, processed data, reprocessed data, and we have to sort of make decisions about how to handle that. There are the technical challenges. So actually just linking all the instrument PCs and the storage and the compute together is technically challenging, but that's something that we're just working through, and it just takes time to do it. And also just having to make sure that we're designing for scalability and adaptability. So for instance, some Core Facilities are going to start to use software that requires artificial intelligence in the future, so bioimaging, for instance. And we need to make sure that our hardware is capable of handling that in the future. And also this question of transfer of ownership. So at some point we are transferring data from Core Facilities to PIs, and the question is when that should happen. So those are just some of the challenges. There are others as well that we're working through, but these are the ones that are particularly thorny at the moment for us. So with that, I will thank you